Okay. All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Have attention, please. All quiet, please. Thank you. Go ahead and take out the 1989 People Power video. We're going to be continuing with that, looking at, I think let me see on that. We were pretty far along. We're going to be looking at the latter years of the dictatorship of the communists over the Soviet Union. Yeah. And how it all unravels. And how the Soviet Union will not ultimately continue on as a communist dictatorship, and there'll actually be some democracy for a while. And capitalism actually will continue on. Okay? So we're going to look at that, have that at the ready. I do want to go over with you some stuff. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, but the last time I got together with you was on Election Day. And since that time, we have gotten a 100% voter tabulation in Ada County. My brother won. Woohoo! There we go. Okay, so that was good. But it was interesting because that was for one of the Ada County Highway District seats. There were 3 out of the 5 that were up for election this time around, and one of them, the decision was made, ultimately a difference of 2 votes. 2 votes. That is fascinating. When you have just 2 votes, I don't know, if you lose by 2 votes, what do you ask for? Very good, a perfect recount. You've been hearing some of that. Because in fact, in one of the states that they've gotten pretty much all the vote counted, Wisconsin, President Trump's campaign is asking for a recount. Now the margin there is about 20,000. And they've done recounts across the entire state of Wisconsin in the past. You get a shift. I think the last time there was a shift of maybe a few hundred votes. So don't expect too much from the Trump, if you're on the Trump camp, as far as that changing. My uncle Reed Hansen, you see the poster right over here, Reed Hansen? She was in the legislature. He lost an election, a primary election, by 5 votes. They did a recount. I remember. I was there. They took all the ballots from, it was like 15 or 20 precincts, and they put them all through the county machines again. Oh, there was a change in one of the precincts by 1. Oh, there was a change in another precinct by 1. After it was all said and done, it was still 5. He still lost by 5 votes. So, your vote matters. These things matter. It does. Because in 20 years ago, Florida, actually this time it was quite clear, Trump won Florida quite convincingly, but Florida 20 years ago, in the race between President George W. Bush, he became president as a result of that, hang on, shh, and Clinton's Vice President Al Gore, Florida came down to a difference of a few hundred votes. And they did a recount there, and it changed some. And then, of course, if you lose the recount, you're like, let's do another recount. I mean, it was like, hey, even if you're the losing thing, you're like, let's keep this thing on. And that went on into December, and the folks that had won the recount are like, hey, come on, can we get a final decision? The Secretary of State of Florida, whose responsibilities include making sure elections are all taken care of and so forth, she certified that the Florida vote was final after the recount. Of course, she's a Republican, but nevertheless, so the Democrats are appealing. Al Gore is appealing. And it went through the courts, all the way up to the Supreme Court. 9 justices on the United States Supreme Court. Talk about one vote making a difference. The vote was 5-4. That's 1 vote among Supreme Court justices. And the vote was that the Secretary of State of Florida had authorized that the vote was over and that the recount had been done, and therefore the final vote tally in favor of Bush was enough to carry him over, and he had an electoral college victory, and he became the President of the United States. You got that? I don't know if that's going to turn out that way. I'll give you kind of a sense of where things are right now. Quick question. Oh, I don't know. I mean,
taking the ballot thing and then throwing them away.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, sometimes I've got papers and I'm like, yeah. I mean, I threw it over here. I mean, if you have a piece of paper, an envelope, and so forth, I don't know. I don't know about that.
And there was a guy that took like a couple thousand of the votes and just set them all online.
I don't know about that. I haven't seen that. That sounds pretty sketchy. I tell you what, though. One of the things that people have been observing about this election is that it's taking some time for some of the states to get this thing done. Am I right?
Yeah.
We still don't know the result in Nevada or Pennsylvania or North Carolina or Georgia, and maybe not even in Arizona. Arizona, some of the news media folks have said, hey, Biden's got it. Although, if you look, there's still about 12% of the vote still to be tabulated. So it could work out that Trump comes back in favor, although from what I'm reading, the predictions are probably fairly accurate, but we don't know. We'll see. But here is part of this as to why is it taking so long for some states. Part of it has to do with something you guys can appreciate. If you get an assignment 4 weeks before it's due, how many of you guys are more like, I want to get this thing done early because I don't want to be too rushed at the end? You may have lived and learned. Over time, eventually, it will catch up to you all. My daughter, she got through high school fine, but eventually she got into college and she was like, oh my gosh, they're giving us all these papers. I'm like, sit down, it's okay, honey. It's okay, because it really started freaking her out. And so we came up with a plan, and we looked at all the assignments and papers and things she had to do in college for that semester, and we laid out a schedule, and she was fine. Eventually, it catches up to us all. But sometimes you don't have a choice, right? How many of you guys leave it to the last minute, the night before, to get the things done? Right. So sometimes you don't have a choice. Idaho and Florida are among the states that their rules, given by the state, allow for the early vote. And this year there was a lot of early vote. There were a lot of people using mail-in ballots and so forth because they just didn't want to go into a crowded polling place and potentially suck in the same stuff that other people were breathing. All right? So those states allowed you to mail it in, and here's the kicker. As those votes were collected, they were tabulated. Now, it wasn't made public, but it's like they got it tabulated. So, for example, on election day, well, in Idaho, we know by midnight. I mean, it still takes a while to get all the vote tabulation from that day, because you have to wait in Idaho until 8 o'clock, and then you get it all together, and you put it in the back of the car, and you drive it to the Ada County Elections Office, and then they take it out and they put it through the machines. But we knew by shortly after midnight. Florida, they had it done fairly early too. They released information on the mail-in vote first. And then they were putting out the information, the results from the voting of the day of. You're like, well, what difference does that make? Actually, I think you know. Among the people who voted early, raise your hand if you think Trump did better among the people who voted early by mail. Raise your hand if you think Biden did better among the people who voted early by about a 30 to 40 point margin. It's a big difference. What about on the day of? People who voted on the day of. Raise your hand if you believe that Trump did better of people who voted on the day of. Again, by about a 30 to 40% margin. So states like Florida that put out the information of the early vote first, Biden went out to a big lead. But then as the day of vote was included, the margin got smaller and smaller and smaller, then eventually Trump came in first place in Florida. Other states, like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, for example, their state rules said you can collect all the early vote, but you can't count it until the day of the election. And they're like, what the heck? On the day of the election, we're going to be counting all the votes of the people who actually voted on the day of the election. So a number of the counties in places like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, they waited. So the first vote that was reported out of these states showed who in the lead? Trump in Wisconsin and Michigan. In fact, By the end of, how many of you guys stayed up watching some of this stuff on election night? Yeah, it's very interesting. How many of you guys stayed up way past your regular bedtime? Yeah, there we go. I was like, I got to get up at 5 o'clock the next day. I mean, you guys can sleep, right? I don't know. We've got Zoom classes or whatever. But I'm like, I'm tired already. It's like, woof. But by the next day, they were counting the vote of the people who mailed it in. And eventually, it was close, as we saw, 20,000 vote margin. Eventually, Biden caught up. The Michigan margin, by the time they got all the people in there, they got 99% of the vote counted. Biden's margin is what? Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah, 140,000 or 50,000 or something like that. So that's quite a bit there. Pennsylvania still has a ways to go. Although I've heard, looking at the news, that maybe Pennsylvania may have it wrapped up today. And some of the expectation is that because a lot of that's going to be, well, all of it's the mail-in vote, and a lot of it's mail-in vote from some of the cities, like Philadelphia, that there's an expectation that Biden's going to make up that margin and come out actually ultimately ahead quite a bit. Does that make any difference? Well, if you look at this, the states that we still don't know yet, we got Nevada, and this morning, Biden had a 8,000 vote margin. Now they've got more of the vote in there, and it's about a 12,000 vote margin, which states like Nevada and Idaho. You add 10,000 people, you notice it, okay? I mean, that's a big difference there. Georgia, I think Trump may ultimately still prevail there, although it's gotten closer. Some people expect that maybe Georgia ultimately will end up being a Biden state because of a lot of the vote that hasn't been counted yet around Atlanta. Okay, it's mail-in stuff, yeah. There is the North Carolina one, and that's probably, most expectations are probably going to be that that's going to be a Trump one. Alaska, I think that's going to be a Trump one. It's like, what the heck? Come on, Alaska. You know, stop hunting bear, you know? There's a lot of people there. It is one of the smallest populated states, though. Yeah, whatever. So, but here's the deal. How many do you need to win? If he gets Nevada, is that enough? What about Pennsylvania? Is that enough? Georgia? Alaska? No, that's no. Okay. Question. No, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't believe you're going to have a revote as part of this whole thing. You could have recounts, all right? You could also end up with potentially some lawsuits as far as whether any shenanigans are going on. And that's where it's really important that you don't just have like rumors of somebody did this and you saw a stack of this and da-da-da. Then you would have to have really concrete evidence of the way things work. Like, for example, my Uncle Reed's race where he lost by 5 votes. I mean, we went in there and we're like, we got to get a different result. And we're like, well, they're all doing it the way they're supposed to do it. I mean, they were very efficient, reliable, trustworthy people, and my uncle lost by 5 votes. Still sucks. I mean, that's what happens. If you look at the national vote count, it is interesting because not that this matters necessarily. The popular vote is not how we pick the president. Not the national popular vote. State by state popular vote is how we do it. But unless there is really solid evidence of like really bad shenanigans going on in some of those critical states that have close margins, we may end up having a clear result. Maybe even as early as tonight. Perhaps. I don't know. Follow-up question and then over there.
I honestly don't think it's fair, because like, if you just look at the math, Trump has more than half the...
So let me ask you this question. Now here's a quick comeback. What should count most? Acreage or people?
Acreage, people.
Yeah.
The acreage is going to...
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look and you like scroll over, you know, Alaska's got, I mean, that's a small version. That's mini Alaska on this map right here. If you look at Alaska, actually, and this is actually supersized, but it's big. I mean, Alaska, if you overlaid it, it would cover like, you know, most of the western states. So should Alaska have more of a say-so just because it's bigger?
Every state has like one, so like, you know, one state can vote for Trump, one state can vote for Biden.
In this country, people vote.
So if someone were to reach 270 votes, the instant they get it, would they just drop everything and say they're the winner?
This is a good question. This is very interesting. You asked this. Because if you look at some of these like maps, like if you look at some of the, this is for Associated Press. This is actually pretty similar, I think, to what you'd see on Fox News. Arizona, for example, some of the other ones have said it's too close to call. There's still too many votes out there. We don't know how it's going to come in. The official final version from each state is going to be coming as the week goes on, maybe even into next week. Okay. It's very interesting because it's like, what difference does it make if you declare yourself the winner and you're not the winner? I don't know, maybe you look a little foolish later on. Has any of the two major party candidates declared themselves the winner?
Yes.
Yes, who? Trump did. Okay. So what if he's wrong? I don't know. I mean, it's like his thing, and right now he's looking, and he's got his lawyers looking and making sure, are there shenanigans going on in some of the different states? And if there are, then you bring lawsuits and da-da-da-da-da. And you have recounts at the very least. So right now, Biden's kind of like waiting. I think for Biden, because he kind of feels like he's going to end up winning this thing, he would prefer not to jump the gun. He would prefer to have the news media looking at the actual counting of the votes say to him, you won. And then he'd be like, I won. And then he'd be waiting for a couple things. One, the opponent to concede. That's a big one. Long time ago, before I was born, 1960, there was a very close race between John F. Kennedy, president number 35, and the vice president at that time, who was Richard M. Nixon, who would be later president number 37. Kennedy won in a close vote, but there was some there seems to be some hanky-panky in Illinois and Texas. And people are like, Nixon, you should bring lawsuits to have, things looked at closer. And Nixon was ultimately like, no, I concede. If you concede, that means the other person and everyone looks at them as like, okay, you're the winner. And they move on and prepare as though that's the case. Does that make sense? So I don't know. If Biden is declared the winner and Trump does not concede, then we'll have to see how it plays out in the courts and stuff.
Do you think that Trump will begin to win, later on? And then when all the votes are finally counted, that Biden will win and Trump will claim.
And that was part of the thing that was kind of going on with the whole Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. I stayed up late, and Trump came on. It would have been after 2 o'clock his time, after midnight. Anybody you guys catch Trump on late an extra night? And he basically was saying, and he said this again yesterday, that he won on the basis of that early vote count. Here's an analogy. Let's say that I were to take two of you, and you're going to have a contest, and whoever does best on one of my tests is the winner. But here's what I do. You take the test, and then I start grading it, and then I get kind of tired, and I stop grading it after the matching section. I don't get to the true-false section. And so I'm like, I'm going to declare the winner based on just the matching section, just the first part of the test. Some of you guys go that's great. I do well on the matching section. And other people are like, no, I do better on the true-false section. So here's the deal. If you have cast a valid ballot, do you deserve to have your vote counted, even if it takes a couple of days? That's where we're at right now. Totally separate from the question about whether or not a ballot is valid. Let the court sort of that out. And if it doesn't make ultimately a difference, then it's we have a word for that. It's called moot, as in it don't matter. It's moot. You've got a good argument, but it's moot because they still won, right? I mean, if you're like, I scored a touchdown, that should have counted. You lost by 5 touchdowns. It's moot. It don't matter. Got it? So we'll see. It's going to take a little bit of time, but we're getting closer to having some of those states wrapped up. A few more questions here, there.
Oh yeah, so I don't, so if you are going to vote and you're not going to vote for anyone just saying, I don't want to vote, you still have to fill out a ballot?
So here's the deal. And you'll discover this year, if you haven't discovered it already. When you vote, you get a ballot, and it's got a lot of different things on it. I bring up my brother's case, his election because it was one of the last things on the ballot. I mean, you had the president's race, you had U.S. Senate, you had U.S. House of Representatives, you had Idaho legislative races, you had judges, I mean, you had like state, initiative things, and then eventually you had Ada County Highway District. This is what some people do. They skip things. They're like, I don't know. I don't want Biden or I don't want Trump. And I'm not too sure about Kanye West. Don't know much about him. I hear he's a musician. Anyway, so they might skip some of those races. This actually happens more often. Somebody shows up and they're like, I'm going to vote for president. And then they get the ballot and they're like, oh, I got that one. What's all this other stuff here? Hello, that's government, okay? It's not just the national government is in charge of everything. You've got all these other ones. People skip those ones, those down ballot races. So you don't have to vote in every single one. I would encourage you to become knowledgeable and thoughtful and pick the best choice among the choices you have in each of the different races. Does that make sense? Follow up.
Was there just Trump, Biden, and Kanye West, or was there like...
No, I want to say on Idaho's ballot, it was like about 8. Yeah, there was a bunch. There was like a libertarian, there was a constitutional, the Green Party, I think there was a socialist. Yeah, socialists don't tend to do very well in this country. Yeah, but there was, oh my gosh, yeah. There's like a range of socialism. How many of you guys are in favor of public schools? Like, as in you guys don't have to pay for the education you're getting right now. There we go. Originally, that's kind of like a socialist idea. It's like the idea of the government paying for various different kinds of things. Now, is it as extreme as the kind of socialistic communist thing that we're watching and learning about right now?
Yes.
No, thank you very much. No. Where the government's in charge of everything. No. Yes.
So, say Trump loses.
Yes.
And Biden gets president. Can Trump go be president after Biden?
Good question. Look at number 22 and 24. And there is the answer. It's only happened once in history. Somebody who was defeated, Grover Cleveland was defeated by Benjamin Harrison, came back 4 years later and won. Could Trump do that? Yeah, he's eligible.
How about the Congress races?
Okay, let me show you this. In fact, that's a good segue because we're going to transition over here. Whoops. So, I'm saying probably, I'm guessing, likely, Biden will be the next president. What about the Senate? You're like, is there more to national government? Well, yes, there is. There's the presidency, right, the executive, and then there's Congress. There's 2 parts of Congress. One of them is the Senate. There are 100 Senate seats. The Democrats actually were anticipating picking up some Senate seats and having ultimately a majority out of the 100. As it turns out, each state gets 2. You'll learn this officially as we go through. Each state gets 2 Senate positions. They're each good for 6 years. You got that? But like sometimes, like California, Nevada, Utah, they didn't have a Senate position up this year. Idaho had one of its 2. Most states, it's like one of their 2 is going to be up at one given time. Georgia had 2 of them up this time because they had 1 partial Senate seat to complete. The Republicans actually did a lot better than expected. Right up here in Maine, Susan Collins, everyone was expecting that Republican to lose. In fact, every single poll that was taken this year showed that Susan Collins was going to lose. And guess what? She won by 9 percentage points. So the Republicans have done better, and I'm guessing, take a look at this. We got a Republican lead here. We got a Republican lead here. We'll see if those work out. We got a Republican lead in one of the Georgia races, and the other one is going to go to a runoff within the next month or so. I'm guessing that the Republicans are going to remain in a slight majority in the Senate. Maybe 51-49 or 52-48, something like that. Now, the other part of Congress is the House. My dad, Orville Hanson, he used to serve in the United States House of Representatives. Right? Those are elected. There's 435 of them. They're elected for 2 years. And here, seriously, look at the map here. The Republicans should be in charge of the country. My gosh, look at all that red. Well, in fact, a lot of those districts, those bigger ones, tend to be more rural, tend to be more Republican. The Democrats tend to do better in city districts, and even though they're not as expansive, they've got just about as many people as the other ones. The Democrats were expecting to pick up maybe 10 or 15 seats. As it turns out, they've actually looked like they may have lost about 6 seats to the Republicans. I think when it's all said and done, the Democrats will still be in a bare majority in the House. So where is that going to lead us potentially going into next year? Democrat president, bare majority Republican Senate, bare majority Democrat House. Hello, people. If we've got big problems like COVID and stuff, do you think maybe you could work together and overlook maybe some of that Republican-Democrat differency kind of thing? It could happen. I hope it happens. When my dad was in Congress in the late 60s and early 70s, he was a Republican, and the Democrats who were in the majority in the House. Does that mean that he never got his way? Wrong. They worked together. Okay? Yes.
So say you have the ballot in front of you, and you don't see a person that you want to vote for. What do you do? Like, let's say, for example,
You can skip it.
You want to vote Obama again, but he's not on the ballot.
Well, he's not eligible because he's already served 8 years, constitutionally ineligible. You skip it. You can skip it. You can skip it.
But what if you want to add something?
Oh, you can write it in, and that happens. It's really hard to organize a write-in campaign, but it could happen.
What are you gonna do Biden with?
Oh my gosh! Will you guys, have we talked about this in this class? Thank you very much. I'm going to do what I want to do, and you're just going to have to do what you're going to do.
You have an even square with just one, like,
I'm thinking of leaning toward like taking the bottom row out, okay? Because they're all like individual ones, and they're taped together in the back. It's a real hassle, just like these are all. But don't tell me, oh, we're going to have a new country. You need to. No, I'm not going to reorganize that. That's not going to happen. So I'll probably take the bottom out and then just like attach Biden over to Trump and then have it like, one thing on the bottom. No, it needs to be perfectly symmetrical or whatever Should we have like a little flappy thing with Trump and Biden depending on the day? For those of you guys who are like, well, I'm not sure. He's not really my president. Who are you talking about now? I know. It's like, get over it. Somebody's going to be your president. In America, the election is over. Let the next election begin. I mean, seriously, let the next election begin. They already are starting to get ready for the next election. Who will be the next 2 presidents? When you guys get the first chance to vote for president, who are going to be the Republican nominee and the Democratic nominee? Is it going to be Biden and Trump again in a rematch? 2 old guys going at each other? Will it be Harris? I don't know. Will it be somebody else? I don't know. Any other questions? Shall we move on? All right, let's do this.
It's going to be Kanye West and Eminem.
Yeah, for what? Musical Performer of the Year or for... Oh, of course, for President of the United States, because that makes perfect sense. Yeah. All right, here we go.
Honestly, it probably wouldn't be too girls.
I wouldn't be surprised. Shh. What if it is Kamala Harris, Democrat, versus, I don't know, like Nikki Haley, Republican? She's a Republican. She was the former South Carolina governor and United States ambassador to the United Nations.
No, they should have Nicki Minaj versus Biden.
Trey, are we ready? What number are we on?
That'd be the best. Because they could
32. And maybe it's going to be AOC. Alexandria or Ocasio-Cortez.
Reforms began challenging the state's total control over the economy. Eugene Haya, who for 20 years had worked in this large state-run food shop, embraced the opportunity Gorbachev presented.
Gorbachev said, come on, wake up, make some money, organize your own corporation.
31.
It was good.
Does Gorbachev want private business? Yes. If websites?
All across the
You
Soviet
can bring them in.
Union, long-suppressed nationalism burst into the open. Soon the Gorbachev revolution was spinning out of control.
I got to pause it right here because here's the deal, number 32. When Gorbachev encourages people to talk about what they really want to talk about, one of the things that people talk about is not, oh, Gorbachev, we're interested in your economic ideas. Number 32, they're interested in their national independence. You see them start to fly the flags of their nations, like Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania. They don't like their stupid communist flags and so forth that have been imposed on them by the Soviet Union. No, they look for the opportunity to become independent. Will they get that? Yes, they will. How will they get that? Actually, in some of the places, through cultural things. It's our next unit. It's our next video. Music? Are you kidding me? You're going to have people who sing songs for independence from Estonia getting their independence? I mean, that's going to happen. And how do you do that if you have no real good consumer items that have like guitar strings available in the store? Well, you write to your friend in America, me, and then me sends them to the guitarist, and he's going to get up in front of 300,000 people and play. We're going to have the singing revolution coming up. Yes? You can borrow one and then bring it up so you can write down the things, bring it up. Wouldn't that be a good idea? Just borrow a packet so you can write down the answers separately, like in some other kind of device? Yes, and then you can hand it back so that other people can borrow it later on. So we don't have to go down and displace the Guarani or any other indigenous tribes to cut down the trees to create the additional pieces of paper for you just because you forgot it. It's okay.
That was a very wow.
Yeah, it is wow. So anyway, rock and roll and music are going to play a part of this independence movement as part of what's going on in the Soviet Union. Yes? So the answer is yes, national independence, yeah. Minutes, good. The Russians want to fly the old Russian flag, the red, white, and blue.
Power by Moscow's past willingness to send in the tanks. When Gorbachev removed that threat, the first cracks appeared.
Whoa! Gorbachev allows people in Eastern Europe to have more freedom, and they take down.
New leaders began to dismantle the old political system, even allowing people to take down sections of the Iron
They're taking down the border fences so people can go freely over into Western Europe, can escape.
In Poland, Solidarity, whose popular support had never been destroyed, forced the government to hold free elections. They swept to power.
They swept to power. Look who ended up becoming the new leader there.
Regimes from Romania to East Germany still seemed firmly in charge.
Pause. In Poland, Solidarity, remember the labor union that got beat up in the last viewing? Remember they got beat up really bad? Yeah. Now they're a political party. They run candidates in 100 Senate races against communist candidates in 100 Senate races. If you were to look at the map there, like we were looking at there earlier, and you had Poland up there, and you had all the 100 Senate seats and so forth, guess how many of them would be going to be won by Solidarity? 99. I don't know. One of them was won by a communist. That was it. It was like, these guys are very, very popular. Yes?
So is solidarity,
Yes, number 33. Solidarity is the answer. Very good. 33. And now Gorbachev is visiting. Number 34. He's visiting East Berlin.
Berlin, the East German leadership celebrated 40 years of communism as if nothing had changed. Most East Germans, like Barbara Reinke, knew differently.
People were quieter. Previously, you would always celebrate the 7th of October, and you'd be forced to be cheerful. So that day, there was something in the air.
The crowds chanted for the visiting Gorbachev.
Ooh, 34?
Die-hard leaders.
They like Gorbachev because Gorbachev is all about, hey, do your thing.
Gorbachev was our great hope. Even down here in my street,
34 is Gorbachev.
Gorbachev on the wall. We had such hopes of him.
Because Gorbachev's like, hey, look, if you want to do your thing, that's fine. Well, I'm not going to send in the troops.
Just a couple of blocks from the official pageantry, a counter-demonstration was broken up by the police.
In the Schönhauser Allee, people were being beaten. Plainclothes police took truncheons out of their pockets and beat up monsters.
No, that's not very nice.
I thought finally I can do something. I can stand up and support these people. I don't have to sit around at home. Now I can do something.
So what about it? Would you show up at a protest the next day after they beat up protesters the night before?
Tactics that night, the demonstration spread.
35.
Passively accepted the status quo, brave enough
Did the
to
demonstration
take a
stop?
stand. And with the
No.
opposition swelling, the party was driven into making hurried concessions.
So they're going to have to open up the Berlin Wall. There's the border guard.
After 7 p.m., I was having my dinner in our canteen. We had a black and white television. I watched the press conference on it.
The party had decided to let people travel to the west. But the spokesman failed to announce that the visas needed would not be issued until the next
You need a piece of paper to travel from East Germany to West Germany. So when can you go?
When he turned the bit of paper, it said something like, as I understand it, immediately. I thought...
So you can just show up and cross over into West Berlin? Maybe.
Here at home, I screamed so loud, even though I was all alone. I screamed, the wall is open.
As thousands made their way to the west, Barbara Reinke set out for the Brandenburg Gate. On a night of confusion, she found herself blocked by a line of border guards.
I became terribly frightened and thought they'd tricked us again. I felt he was a block. I thought, never again.
He's being very restrained.
Can't go through here.
Will she get through that night?
You're not allowed to do that. No more. I'm going
She will.
through.
If it had been 2 days earlier, he would have, like, shot.
Later
That's
that
what they
night,
were doing.
Barbara achieved her ambition.
It's a party. Clear sign the Cold War's over.
Berlin exploded in joy.
The Berlin Wall is coming down. The husband didn't want to come? Would you go to that gathering? Heck yeah. That's how I got this. Just kidding. She went in her nightie and overcoat. Schöner Tag. Wonderful day. It's a big deal. So Germany, within a year or so, they're going to come together, east-west, as one country, united again. Wow.
We talked later that night. Someone said, that's it. That's the end of the GDR.
So what about the other countries of Eastern Europe? What about Czechoslovakia?
Black underground cartoons celebrated the revolutions. Poles, Hungarians, and East Germans had broken free. Now the Czechs tried to join them.
Ooh, the Velvet Revolution. Is this going to be peaceful or violent? Lots of people, lots of songs, lots of protest. November of '89. This is after the Berlin Wall came down.
Inspired by dissident playwright Václav Havel, huge crowds took over the
He'll be on your test. Václav Havel. He's the leader of the Velvet Revolution.
After a chance meeting with Havel, the factory worker Petter Miller became the workers' representative in negotiations with the government.
We were amazed at the reaction of our opponents at meetings. He was someone who had all that power at his disposal and could control everything. Suddenly, this man was sitting opposite you. He was very small, and he didn't have an idea.
The Czech party leadership, without the threat of the Red Army to back them up, was floundering.
What's going to happen? Number 36. Will it be peaceful or will it be violent? What's going to happen?
When we got back, we locked the door and burst into hysterical laughter.
In 2 weeks, 40 years of communist rule was swept away.
What? Oh, here we go. Czech television has just announced that the communist government has resigned. It's peaceful. Not going to be a bunch of bloodshed on the streets. The people get what they want. Woo! That was
It
Czechoslovakia.
was called the Velvet Revolution.
Václav Havel will end up being their president, freely elected. Now let's turn our attention to Romania with its dictator, Nicolae Ceausescu. It's wintertime.
Romania, nothing changed.
Oof.
That winter, life was made up of desperate shortages, with daily power cuts and temperatures well below freezing. In the same week as the revolution in Prague, Nicolae Ceausescu held a party congress. The faithful greeted him as they always did, and he rewarded them with a 6-hour speech.
6-hour speech. Woo!
Communist Party and all the people of Romania are the same.
Got to stand up and applaud again.
67 standing ovations.
67 standing ovations. Is he popular? In that room he is,
The Romanian press had never even reported it.
but not in the rest of the country.
There was no information about what was going on in Eastern Europe. But here in Timișoara, we had a trump card. Through Yugoslav TV, we had news about the outside world.
Here's the deal. The government had kept control of the news media, so most of the people in Romania didn't know what was going on. But in Timișoara, a Romanian city, they were near the Yugoslav border, and they could pick up on their radios and television and so forth news broadcasts of what was going on elsewhere. And so in Europe, they knew what was going on, so what do you suppose these guys are going to do? They're going to start protesting. Well, let's see what Nicolae Ceausescu does when they start protesting. Let's take a look. I wonder what's going to happen.
Emboldened by what they knew had happened in Berlin and Prague, the people of Timișoara in
That's
western
closer.
Romania were the first to dare to protest. Ion Savu, who worked in a local soap factory, found himself leading a rebellion.
For the first time in my life, I felt free. All over the place were the signs of the communist regime.
How do you stand up to communism? Tear his picture out of
Long
books.
live Comrade Ceausescu, the beloved leader. That day, we destroyed all those symbols of the party and Ceausescu.
What's Ceausescu going to do? What's the answer going to be to number 37? Is it going to be peaceful or violent?
Main Square.
Looks peaceful so far. They're just having parades and stuff.
Even Leontina Benchoy heard the demonstration outside.
Wipe your desks down.
When she saw that I was determined to go out and not even finish the second course, she left the potatoes in the pot and decided to come with me.
As the march approached the bridge into the center of town, it became clear Ceausescu was not going to give in like his German and Czech comrades.
Uh-oh.
There were troops with their weapons aimed at us.
Uh-oh.
When the group approached, they opened fire without any warning.
Uh-oh.
People screamed in pain. My wife fell clinging to my arm.
Uh-oh.
Wait, so it was violent?
Oh, yeah.
She was hit by one bullet in the back, straight through the heart. I thought she was still alive, but she died right there on the spot.
His wife, he persuaded her to join the protest, and she was killed. After you have wiped down, you may go. Au revoir. Have a good long 3-day weekend. We'll see you on Tuesday.